Israeli lawmakers on Sunday began debating a proposed judicial overhaul that has sparked mass protests. It would limit the Supreme Court's powers and is instigated by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's religious nationalist coalition. Sunday's step reboots a drive Netanyahu suspended in March after months of huge protests. On Saturday night, tens of thousands of Israelis opposed to the bill blocked a major Tel Aviv highway. Netanyahu declared last week that compromise talks with opposition parties had been fruitless and ordered some of the legislation to be revived. Coalition lawmakers have indicated that the new bill would be much softer than the previous proposals, which sought to almost totally roll back the Supreme Court's power to rule against the executive. But critics see it as an attempt to curb court independence by Netanyahu, who is on trial on graft charges that he denies. Opposition leader Yair Lapid on Twitter urged Netanyahu to stop the legislation and revive negotiations until, quote, "we reach agreements that will safeguard democracy and prevent a national disaster." The proposed judicial changes have also stirred Western concern over Israel's democratic health and spooked investors.
Email exchanges from inside the BBC, they talk about the risk of violating Indian laws. It's easier to rake up the freedom of speech debate, but does it give anyone a free pass to knowingly violate the law? America supports India because it needs India's support in return. And India is working with the US because it suits India's interests. This is how geopolitics works. Last night, he diffused a crisis with his defense minister. But today, Netanyahu was confronted with a new problem. His cabinet seems to have rebelled against him. The UK is looking at the Indian subcontinent to fill its coffers. That India seems to be negotiating from a position of power, like a partner and not a former colony. The US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.